go a little fancier today because I'm in too good of a mood to talk politics. I just got the new book from 1936 by Frank Meyer. Now, he was the bartender at the Ritz for 26 years, starting in 1921. He studied under Harry Craddock in New York beforehand and brought his skills to the Ritz, which was the destination for everyone from Ernest Hemingway to FDR to Cole Porter, eventually to the SS and the Nazis when they came to Paris. Now, he was always passing notes and a suspected spy. The circle was coming in on him just when the Allies kicked him out. But the entire time, he was in too good of a mood to talk politics, as he always pretended. Kept this bar going and made some of the iconic drinks that we can do. So today, since I'm in too good of a mood to talk politics, we're going to make some of those cocktails. Ready? Now, he measured his cocktails in glasses, but really a glass was just 2 ounces. So don't be too confused. And actually, the book includes some things for us to figure it all out. All of the cocktails that we're going to do were invented by him. There's tons of cocktails in here. You can get the entire range of what was available at the Ritz. He probably had it all in his memory too. But today we'll start with the bee's knees. That cocktail's the cat's ass. The bee's knees is one of the cocktails that you're gonna want a shaker for. You take a quarter of a lemon, squeeze that puppy in. I don't have a strainer. I don't know what I'm doing as well as I do with the steak, to be honest with you. I'm not as drunk. You take a shaker, use a quarter of a lemon, a half a glass of gin, which is in his world is 1 ounce. Don't get too excited, boys. And a teaspoon of honey. You're not going to want to stir this, you're just going to want to get the honey off your spoon. Add some ice to this cocktail and shake it vigorously. Sounds complicated, tastes complicated, but like most of his cocktails, just delightfully simple. And if the 2021 Americans would like to triple their pour, no one's gonna tell. A bartender, according to Frank, had to be able to talk to anyone about anything at any time, no matter how many drinks they'd been served, and he was making a pretty penny at this bar. In his section on useful information, he includes such things as different anecdotes to poisons, the circumference of the planet, how to discuss pressure with people, different other complicated mathematical formulas, some of which came in use to him, but mostly just in the art of talking to people, which is half of what he did. And as we went through, from Hemingway to Himmler, he talks to a lot of very, very different people. Let's see what the Brits think. Cheers.
Oh, yeah.
That's the bee's knees. The best way to make your honey actually become part of that drink and not just stick to the ice in your spoon in the glass is to use honey syrup. It's equivalent of making simple syrup right beforehand. It's not that difficult. Hop on YouTube. The next cocktail we're going to do is the Elegant, one I've never even heard of. Now, I'm not always a very particular person about different cooking recipes, but with cocktails sometimes you need to be. And Frank Meyer is someone who absolutely demanded that you be exact in your cocktails, exact in your measurements, exact in your history of horse racing, which is probably one of the reasons he was able to pass notes around in an actual SS hotel for so long without getting skinned alive. But he describes a dash as 12 drops. Fortunately, I actually have a dropper from making Sazeracs back in the day, and sometimes adding different distilled waters to your scotches. So I'm going to do 12 ounces. Now, what he asked for, Grand Marnier. Now, you might be noticing that this is actually Cointreau and not Grand Marnier. That's true. I didn't have any Grand Marnier. But, according to the Tom Cruise movie, he tried to kill Hitler with a bottle of Cointreau. So I think Mr. Myers would agree. A half an ounce of French vermouth. Now, he doesn't actually say which vermouth you should use, but because we're using gin in this cocktail, we're going to assume it's a dry vermouth. We use Dolan. And remember, a half a glass in Frank Meyer's book is 1 ounce. Now, people don't realize this, but vermouth should absolutely be kept in your refrigerator once opened. Most of the gins, when Frank Meyer was making cocktails, came from England and Scotland, so we're going to use Tanqueray. Is that English? Is that French? Where's Tanqueray from?
I don't know.
You're English.
I don't know. That's just the vermouth.
Oh, it's just a vermouth. Half a glass of gin. We're going to Tanqueray. You'll notice that's not a Tanqueray bottle, but it's a very pretty bottle. Add some ice. And stir. Frank Meyer wasn't actually specific on which glass to use, but he would not have served it in this, and neither will we. How delightfully elegant. Cocktails, when they were initially invented, and a lot of them were obviously invented here in France by Americans, or at least American-trained people, were originally involved a lot more ingredients, and were often somewhat sweeter than we have today. There was no wave the vermouth next to the glass for a dry drink. Also, martinis were a lot smaller. The 3 martini lunch was not 9 ounces of gin. It was a whole different thing. This being a mixture of French vermouth and gin equally, with the sweetness of Grand Marnier, you'd think, that doesn't sound like something I would serve today. But this tastes like an absolutely delightful spring martini or hot weather summer martini, something to have in the afternoon if you can get away with it, or maybe certainly before dinner. If they have too many toasts. Can't have too many toasts. There's a great airplane documentary, and there were very few of them, called The Martini. And it talks about how different styles came into the martini, which was originally actually a sweet drink when it was invented in New York. It's since been pushed in London, San Francisco, of course New York, as well as Paris. Where did vodka come in? Well, Joe Stalin. Joe Stalin gave it to the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he got there and said, I'll make your favorite drink with our favorite liquor. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said that this might be the most powerful weapon the Soviets had, and he popularized it, bringing it back to the United States. As the years progressed, vodka was basically the dominant spirit, even though it hadn't traditionally been. Then again, there was almost nothing traditional about the martini, so if anyone ever tells you that that's not how you make a martini, they actually don't know what they're talking about. Martini's been made in so many different ways, by so many different even with so many different liquors, by so many absolutely iconic people, that no hipster in Manhattan has any right to tell you how to make a martini or what it should be. As the 80s and 90s progressed, though, it became bigger and bigger and bigger. Vodka, basically, like a Chili's margarita. Now, you don't want that, because you want a nice, chilled martini. You want something that is cold from start to finish, maybe begins to get a little less cold. You don't want icicles at the top, unless that's how you want it, how you want it, how you want it. Now, what was I gonna add? Too many martinis.
Chris, this is a very nice way to spend a Wednesday.
Quite. A major difference, though, between Cointreau and Grand Marnier is that Cointreau is a lot lighter. Grand Marnier is something that you might enjoy on a winter's evening after a meal if you're so inclined to something sweet. Cointreau, you could drink a little bit more refreshingly, either with soda or without, on ice on a spring evening. The next cocktail is something that you actually might have heard of. It's called the Corpse Reviver. Now, a lot of these cocktails are made for before dinner, after dinner, or just broader cocktails. This one, Frank, which he invented, puts under miscellaneous, which to me says Corpse Reviver number 2. I can have this for breakfast. There's no judgment. One ingredient is 1/4 of a lemon. Now I'm making 2.
Thank you.
You wonder why this is called a Corpse Reviver number 2, and that's because it uses a full glass, or as we now know as 2 ounces, of absinthe, or the absinthe knockoff. Now back then in France, absinthe was illegal because it allegedly drove people crazy. We later learned that that was because of most likely lead poisoning from cheap distilleries, but also a concentrated propaganda effort by the French wine companies in order to go after absinthe so that French people could be overserved on their product as opposed to absinthe. He used Pernod at the time. We'll use Herb Saint, which is from New Orleans, and it's a classic cocktail of the Sazerac. He used a full glass of the Pernod. That is what is going to wake you up. Now, Frank Meyer and any good bartender, which I used to be, knows you should not make a clanking sound when you're stirring something. But I'm not as good as Frank Meyer was, or I used to be. However, does Frank Meyer have Death Star ice cubes? I don't think that he did.
Stay on target. Stay on target.
Now, you might be asking, am I just drinking absinthe and lemon? And no, although he does have some of his earlier cocktails at the beginning of his alphabetical list, simply absinthe and sugar, as it traditionally was drunk, or absinthe and some lemon, we're going to add champagne. Now, we've got some good champagne. He would have used good champagne. But it's an absinthe cocktail, so we're going to use some good Kirkland Prosecco today. Don't tell me. You don't need to film this. This is very embarrassing. I feel like Pamela Anderson. One thing that actually is important about this, in order to get this off and not make a mess, you want to twist. Also, if you're serving this professionally, it's kind of the opposite of the movies. You don't want it to make a sound. However, I'm out of practice. Now, that probably didn't make this any less alcoholic. It reminds me of a time that my dad and I left Brooklotti Distillery in Isla. It was our third one of the day. We felt like we'd been overserved and went to a pub to get a pint to sober up. Kim Bedford tried to disavow us of this notion, but it was already too late. This is a breakfast drink worthy of Winston Churchill. Here, one to the bartender. Frank Myers of the Ritz-Carlton. Oh, that's good. Frank Meyer led the bartender life. He catered to some of the most interesting people in the world, some of the people who simply thought they were interesting but were actually kind of abusive, and then some absolute sociopaths during a wild, crazy, and sometimes horrible time in Europe and especially in Paris. At the end of it, he left behind a book, which you can still buy online. It was first published around 1,200 copies. It sold. And at the end of this, you can still find it if you search. Frank Meyer was eventually dismissed from the Ritz-Carlton in 1947 for asking some of the customers to wire their payment directly to his bank account. He got away with it for a little while. Now, this might sound horrible to you, but the reality is, Ritz himself had been fired from the Savoy, as well as Escoffier, the founder of modern luxury cooking, had been fired from the Savoy for doing basically the exact same thing. So it was not too incredibly uncommon for this to happen. At the same time, the man had risked his life. His contribution to cocktails is absolutely unbelievable. You've seen it in some of the nicest restaurants, some of the nicest bars, and now you can drink it at home. Frank Meyer. Cheers.